Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday morning. Welcome to the Red River Roundup, episode 7, presented as always by the Gridiron All-American Game right here on 446 Sports. We're part of the Pelican Sports Report family, and through 6 weeks of regular season games, like we said last week, most teams into district play this Thursday, Friday. Actually, a few teams that still had some non-district games, but like we mentioned yesterday on our Friday edition, and also a little bit last week, as these PowerPoints start to come out on Tuesdays, we're at the point in the regular season where we're really going to be able to recognize who the contenders and pretenders are based on how those PowerPoints shake out. Still a lot of stuff left to sort out, of course, but starting again in Louisiana with Thursday night games this past week, we had some huge ones across the state. Edna Carr, they remain undefeated. They get another big win over Brother Martin. Easton Roll had another big game. We'll recap that in a little bit with Caroline McPherson. Ruston, they get a 7-point win over the Ouachita Lions, 21-14. That game was at Ruston. Bearcats largely in control of that game. We'll recap some of that. Caroline covered for that as well. And a big game on the North Shore between Covington and Mandeville that we'll recap in a few minutes here with Mike McMillan. But I think just about the game of the week around the state, depending on who you asked, was up in Ouachita Parish, and that was Ash traveling up to visit West Monroe. Trojans previously undefeated, Rebels with, again, that earlier win over Catholic High that kind of got everybody's attention, especially south of I-20 there. So the Trojans go up there at full strength with a defense that's been impressing everybody and with an offense that's been taking care of business against their non-district opponents. The Rebels, question was there, what would they have on offense with Luke Valerie and Trez Davis having missed some games? Davis had wrist surgery just a couple weeks ago. He got back in the lineup last night and was a huge part of the Rebels getting a victory over the Trojans. He scored a touchdown with just, I think, 2 minutes or about 1:40 left to go. We'll recap that in just a moment with Nick Magnano, who's the color commentator for the Trojans right here on 446 Sports. He'll join us via audio and in just a few minutes help us kind of recap that game. That was a wild one that really went down to the last couple minutes and was a battle of some of the two best teams in District 5A. That it's not at all critical to take a loss this time of year. At this point, it's a lot about bragging rights. It's a lot about being the dominant force in that district, and that's what West Monroe was able to do last night. Get you a few scores that were here on 446 Sports last night. Menard, they get a 22-20 win over the Oakdale Warriors. Grant Cougars, they take a loss to Peabody, 54-41. We mentioned that Tioga, they got a win on Thursday night over Wassman, so they'll cruise in and continue into district play with a couple of wins under their belt. One really big game in the Sinlaw area last night was Bunkie and Marksville, Gina and Marksville. The Giants get a 62-46 win over the Marksville Tigers. That's a 3A game that's gone back several years. And sticking in Avoyelles Parish, Bunkie able to get a win this week as well. One game in the 2A ranks that was a pretty good matchup for this past week, Mangum and Faraday. Faraday had to go to Mangum. It was supposed to be at Faraday. Faraday's field deemed unplayable by the LHSAA, so that home game turns into a road game. They go over to Richland Parish to take on the Dragons. Mangum gets out of there with a 56-48 win, one possession game there. So those will be two Division IV teams that we'll keep an eye on the non-select side as they move through this regular season. Turlings Catholic, that was here on 446 Sports as well. They get a 64-0 win over Rain, and they continue their hot start, kind of dominating the top of 4A, especially, and really representing the the Lafayette area quite well. Acadiana 49-42 over the Bar Buccaneers, and we will chat with Chaston Tavares coming up later in the hour about that game and some other games that took place around the Southwest Louisiana area. Lafayette Christian 48, Lafayette Renaissance 7. Got to follow Shannon Belt last night online as she covered that game. The Knights, we kind of started talking about this last week as they, kept stacking up these wins. It kind of flipped from, oh my gosh, this team lost to LCA. I think we're at that point in the season where we might be looking at Lafayette Christian as just as good as they have been in other seasons. Obviously they've turned over a lot of big name players here in the past few years, but with what they're doing on the scoreboard and with what they're doing throughout the regular season so far, I think it's safe to put LCA, right where you'd think they belong, and that's a factor once the postseason comes. So those are a few scores that we got from around the state Thursday and Friday. But again, that really the game of the week, and not my opinion, you ask anybody, and there were a lot of folks that were really interested in the Trojans and the Rebels, and we are thrilled to have the color analyst for the Ash Trojans, Nick Magnano, who is going to join us via phone call. And Nick, you and I talked a little bit coming into this game about the importance of the two receivers for West Monroe that had been out, Trez Davis and Luke Valerie. Other than that, this game was kind of a toss-up. And usually with toss-up games, you'll give the home team a 3-point advantage. And Trez Davis showed up last night, dressed out, showed up and showed out, and that's exactly what happened for the Rebels.
Yeah, you're correct, Marshall. It's good to be on the show with you this morning. I mean, when you talk about an even matchup, look at West Monroe had 368 total yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 field goals, with your Ash Trojans at 349 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 field goal. And basically, you hit the nail on the head. 3-point favorite at home in that facility, and unfortunately, your Trojans couldn't come down with the win. They have not won since at West Monroe since they've joined 2-5A. It's Doug Gann. I appreciate him telling me that, and it was just one of those nights.
So again, going back to Davis, I watched him at the Bayou Jam against Evangel and was immediately impressed with the differences that he can make on offense. And really, it came down. I mean, the play of the game was less than 2 minutes left. He catches the ball in the flat on the left side of their offense. To me, looks dead to rights. Looks like he's about to get tackled there by 3 white jerseys, and he's past the line of scrimmage, and he's going to the end zone. Did it seem to you, just being there last night, that Trez was the difference maker? Not only, I mean, obviously he filled it up, over 200 yards receiving and that key touchdown there. And he may have even had 2 touchdowns. But did you get the sense that defensively, an Ash team that was really, really solid on defense all season, and really last night through most of the plays, was Trez the difference maker? Was the home environment the difference maker? Or was it just West Monroe's night?
Well, I'm gonna tell you one thing. 2 words: Trez Davis. I mean, he was phenomenal, and I appreciate the info you'd given me going into the game. We thought that, as a broadcast crew, we thought that he may not play just coming off that wrist surgery. One hand, and to be honest with you, Marshall, he probably would have had 2 more receptions if he had his, second hand, if he was able to catch with his second hand. But, he ended up with 9 receptions, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns off the screen plays. He also had 1 rush for 21 yards and a touchdown on a reverse. So 21 points of their 28 that they scored on touchdowns, was Trez Davis.
I will say, for the Trojans, you watched them all year. They did the things that they want to do. Sellers was solid. Fontenot was electric, as he usually is. And again, like I mentioned, the defense really played well. You don't want to give up some of those plays, but hanging in there throughout 4 quarters, that defense plays well. Ash has a matchup, I believe, with Pineville next week. And then after that, they face off against Ruston for that annual rivalry game. What's key for the Trojans the next 2 weeks here? Coming off a loss, but still feeling like everything you've got that's gotten you this far is intact.
And you're correct. The defense did play well. The first possession, West Monroe, they won the toss, so they elected it first. So the Trojans got the ball to start off, and on the third play of the possession, there was a fumble at the 25-yard line. So West Monroe takes that in for the first touchdown, and then Ash scores 14 unanswered. And to be honest with you, of the 34 points, like I said, 10 of them came off of turnovers that were inside, Ash's 25-yard line. So and that ended up being the difference of the game.
Yeah, and really, like y'all mentioned last night on the broadcast, a fumble to start the game, a fumble to end the game for the Trojans. And that was, again, West Monroe taking care of business at home over the Trojans. Nick, we appreciate you so much for hopping on with us for a few minutes and your insight. I mean, again, I know everybody was jealous of you getting to be there at the game last night, but appreciate your time this morning, and we'll be keeping an eye on the Trojans all year.
Hey, no problem. I want to give a shout out to you also. One of the things I've listened to on the show, you do a great job, but you talked about Coach Deiser, and so far, I mean, there was a lot of questions coming into him in his first season, and so far, I mean, he's passed 2 of the 3 tests. They did lose to number 1 in a non-select North DeSoto, but they beat Catholic at home, and they took down your Trojans last night. So I appreciate that info on him. He's doing a great job. And then also, I really enjoy the show, Marshall, what Mike does from the North Shore and Chaston from the southwest part of the state. Of course, Jace LeJeune from Gridiron, and now Caroline McPherson. So I appreciate the work that you all do for 446 Sports.
Yeah, Coach Deiser's a man for the job. And, yeah, look, I'm glad you enjoy the show. If you do, it's because of them. I'm just here. I'm just the traffic cop here on Saturday morning. So appreciate you.
Hey, one more shout out to your alma mater, man. I'm at Grace Christian watching the Grace race. My nephew Cole is running in the fun run. So man, we're back at your old stomping grounds.
Hey, it's a good day for PRs. Beautiful weather out there.
Good seeing you, man.
See you, Nick.
Thanks.
Thanks to Nick Magnano, the color commentator for the Ash Trojans on 446 Sports. That was a big game in 5A last night. Some other big games in 5A last night took place down on the North Shore, and Mike McMillan is the man when it comes to everything North Shore athletics. Coming to us this morning, North Shore Prep Report. And Mike, let's start out with that District 6, because I believe, looking at it real quick, there's 4 teams that are 4-2. Am I right there? And how did we get there from this week's games?
Yeah, so last night was wild up here. I say up here and you guys say down there, so it shows the contrast where we're from, right?
The state's shaped like a boot. The geography's just
That's right. I'll start with the biggest one in my mind last night, and that was Mandeville at Covington. Covington's got a really good defense. I think one of the best defenses in the area. I was a little bit surprised, honestly. Go back up a little bit there. Up one more. Keep going. Keep going. It'll go to the preview there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the commitments there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if you go up further, keep going up right there. Click that download PDF.
Okay. Yeah, I'll find that preview here. Just a second.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, one thing I was really surprised about, Covington's defense, which is one of the best ones in the area, and I think maybe even the state. They're extremely talented. Mandeville brings in a freshman quarterback in Crew Calora, and it's, hey, how are you going to react to that kind of defense, right? How are you going to react to those guys? And that was kind of the biggest surprise for me in that game. Crew Calora goes 15 of 22 for 203 yards, another 3 touchdowns. He did throw an interception, but I think in most places in the state, when a freshman quarterback's doing that in 5A, it's going to garner a lot of attention. And I don't think it's long before people start mentioning Crew Calora on a lot of other shows. I did get to see some highlights. It looks like they did do a lot of stuff kind of near the line of scrimmage, a lot of, radars and some screen stuffs, but he's been fantastic. The Covington defensive line and front 7 as a whole is fantastic. Once again, I'll say this, and Colt Salter is not happy, I'm sure. He said in a quote last night that in order to win, you've got to block well and you got to tackle well, and they didn't either. right? So Mandeville gets a massive win to bring them to 4-2. It puts Covington at 4-2. Covington only had 142 yards of offense last night, and they had 12 yards rushing. And it's hard to win any football game that way. So kudos to Mandeville and their defense. Their defensive line played lights out. Massive win for them. It sets up for a pretty exciting next 4 weeks, that's for sure.
How far can Calora take him? I mean, I think it's time to really start giving him the attention. I'm a lefty too, so I'm always root for the Southpaws there behind center. But if the Skippers end up with a single digit seed again, can he make it happen in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so. I think the challenge for them is still identifying who they are on offense, right? And that's hard because Calora wasn't the starter going in. He started week 2 due to Ben Hendricks going out for the season with an injury. So the big thing is Jax O'Quinn, who started the season at running back, he didn't have any carries last night, but they've turned to 2 sophomores, Willis Stepp and Jake Lejeune. Both those guys are kind of young, but they're going to have to establish a run game when they get into that second round of the playoffs, third round of the playoffs. You've got to be able to run the ball. You can't be one-dimensional. And they're well on their way to doing that. So hats off to Coach Jones and that crew for doing it. And look, I'll say this. The Mandeville defense has not played well this season. They've given up a lot of yards to a lot of folks. And to give up 9 to Covington, and I think 4 of those were on 2 safeties. So something like that. So it was a wild one, and kudos to them. Like I said, I'm not surprised by Mandeville winning. I'm surprised by the score. It was a pretty dominant performance by those guys.
Interesting. Well, let's stay in that district. St. Paul's and Hammond. Oddly enough, Hammond coming in with 4 wins, ahead in the standings of the Wolves. But St. Paul's again. You've talked about every single game this year, just how strong they look, and it's easy to give a lot of attention to the undefeated, the one-loss teams, but I mean the Wolves. It's kind of a similar fall for them so far, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a 2-loss team that lost to Brother Martin and U-High. And that was an early Brother Martin team. I don't think what's happened in the last couple of weeks to Brother Martin is indicative of who they are. I think they still can make a run. Eastern Royal made another insane catch last night that made no sense against Carr.
Coverage, yeah,
he's just a cheat code, man. But what I'll say about St. Paul's is, and we talked about this a little bit during the week, was they're tried and tested, right? And it started in preseason camp. They scrimmaged John Curtis. They jamboreed Rummel. They've played everybody. So, and Coach Sears said this in the fall when I talked to him. So I was like, man, are you crazy? Like, what are you thinking doing that early in the, in jamboree and scrimmage, get some confidence. And he said he loves playing those guys because they expose them and they want to know where their weaknesses are so they can improve on them. Right. And Hammond's a good football team. Hammond went to Slidell last week and got a win. I'm not surprised by St. Paul's winning. I am a little bit surprised by the score. I think that game may have been a little closer than the score indicates. But once again, Cody Corrales goes off. 13 carries, 165 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He's a legit Division I running back. He's got, I want to say, Northwestern State, Southeastern, Nicholls State offers. I think there's more on the way for him. Their quarterback, Brady Pearson, only had to throw the ball 7 times last night. Look, I give credit to Hammond, okay? They were in the same spot last year. Now it's kind of who is Hammond, right, for them and Coach Buckles. They lost in similar fashion last year going in that game at 4-1. Now they've got Mandeville Covington coming up, Covington first, or Mandeville first. Those are big games for them because they have to show that they are not who they were last year. Zaylen Bennett, running back, he ran the ball 12 times for 88 yards. Donut had another 6 catches for 87 yards. Taryn Jones is improving in the air. So I'm still high on Hammond. I'm still proud of them and where they are as a program. I just think St. Paul's is kind of clicking right now, and we'll see where that leads.
Yeah, it sounds like hearing you talk about Hammond, maybe the difference for Hammond this year is having those primetime guys that can win those matchups against, the other elite players in that district. As years before, they're going to bring 50 guys on the sideline and see what they can do. But do they have those top end guys that can really, like I said, win those matchups or at least contend within that district?
Yeah, definitely.
North Shore kind of continues their ping pong season. They get a 3-point win over Salmon. And again, it's just a kind of a bar fight in some of these districts where they're all beating each other up.
Yeah, and look, I'll say this: not being a North Shore guy my whole life and being from the South Shore, you have kind of a view of the North Shore, right? I am so pleasantly surprised and impressed with the coaching and the talent on some of these rosters, right? They may not be 20 deep talent-wise, right? But there's 8, 9, 10 kids on all of these rosters that can play for anybody. That's kind of the difference. There's a lot of schools in condensed areas, so they share a lot of kids. But kudos to Coach Sanders and North Shore. Salmon has a chance to kick a 42-yard field goal at the end of that game. It comes up just short. What a fantastic atmosphere once again in the Slidell area. I'm upset for Salmon. I'm really proud of North Shore. It's like I said last week. I hate it now, right? Because for North Shore Prep, it's 500 ball for everybody. So somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. But once again, Salmon puts up some points. They give up some points, right? Now, I haven't got the stats yet, but I'm really intrigued to see what Ramon Williams did again at running back. He ran for 170 yards back-to-back weeks against Covington and Mandeville. So the kid can do it. Coach Sanders, I think, is figuring out who they are on offense. JJ Gonzalez at quarterbacks, playing better. So they're doing well. I'm proud of them. Kind of stay in that area in Slidell. I'll say this. They get a big win at home against Fontainebleau. And the reason I say that is Slidell's got a huge matchup at Covington this week. It's not a district game, but it's a true litmus test for them on where they are as a program. And, Covington's reeling a little bit. So I think that's just an intriguing matchup for next week. But Slidell wins a game 17-7. That's not their style of football. That's not their brand of football. So I'm really impressed with Coach Page and that group of going and getting in a bit of a dogfight, only giving up 7 points. People see Fontainebleau. I don't think people understand what Fontainebleau has on offense. Their quarterback, Connor Tyson, he's an athlete, and he is one of the best. He's a supreme athlete. They've got some young sophomores on that roster that are going to be really good. Coach Kavanaugh's continued to build that program. They haven't gotten that kind of staple win this year, but they're in it every week, and they're giving people blow for blow.
Yeah, and he was involved in the high school career of Omarion Miller, who's at Colorado. Yeah. So he can made the long move from Vivian to Mandeville, but he can do it. That's why he took that job, is to go down there and be amongst.
No doubt. And look, I've got to give flowers to Chalmette in District 7 5A. They are one of the most intriguing teams that we follow. I'll say this: through the first 5 weeks, I didn't really know who they are. And now, they get a 49-7 win over Ponchatoula. Ponchatoula is struggling a little bit, but they've got 2 sophomores. Will Walker, he's a sophomore. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. He's averaging 15 yards a carry. He's really good. He plays some quarterback and running back for them. But Chalmette's defense might be one of the best in the state. They are that good. We'll get to Lakeshore here in a minute, but they lose an early season game to Lakeshore where Lakeshore's up 21-0. In the first quarter, it was boom, boom, boom. Some crazy stuff happened, and they only give up a touchdown the rest of that game and kind of shut Lakeshore down and shut Brody Loudermilk down, which is now becoming more and more impressive. So you can see how good Chalmette is. They've got another linebacker outside of Tyree Aaronsburg, Gonzalez, who is phenomenal. He's a much smaller guy, but he plays physical and gap assignment stuff. He's really good, and their secondary is really good. Breeze Wilson kind of went off last night at quarterback for Chalmette. He had, I think, 4 touchdown passes. 3 of those were to Dana Antoine Jr., who I think is sensational. He's an exceptional athlete and can make some plays. You saw some of that in some highlights against Lakeshore. He just went up and just made plays when he shouldn't have. But kudos to Chalmette for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned Lakeshore. You also mentioned, 500 ball. It's where the Franklinton Demons find themselves. And what I thought about this morning, you see the score last night, and again, your heart breaks for who loses. But then, gosh, you realize they play every year. I think they played in the playoffs last year.
They did in the quarters.
And so you kind of have to, you kind of have to change your mindset with kind of the modern college football outlook, is that these regular season losses don't have to define you. You want the wins, you want the bragging rights, you want to win the rivalries. And I think sometimes that matters as much to the kids as November, December, is we want to beat our rivals. We want to beat my second cousin from down the road. But Franklinton, again, they just have to kind of continue their focus toward the postseason, because they're, not everybody's going to get that one seed. So even if they don't get that this year, they still have the roster to make a push. Do you agree?
1,000%. And I'll say this. I think Coach Salt has a great opportunity here to talk to them about Cecilia, right? Cecilia was a really talented team last year that lost some regular season games. They're an 18 seed going into the playoffs, and they run the table and went out, right? And won a state championship. I'll say this about last night's game. I love both those coaches. I love what they do. I love the kids, the way they play. We at Northlake got to play Lakeshore 2 weeks ago. Makes me feel better about who we are at North Shore. It was 14-8 at halftime, and we played them pretty tough, and they're a physical team. But for Franklinton, they're 3-3. Their schedule, Franklinton players cover years, but it's about to ease up a bit, right? They have run a gauntlet of a schedule, right? Like, they've lost to an early Covington team with a game-ending failed two-point conversion that they come back in. They lose in overtime to Jules Sumner, and then this 41-27 game, the game is a lot closer than that. Jacob Crane, who had a fantastic game, he was 19 of 24, almost 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jaden Burkhalter, my goodness, that kid just continues to go off. I'll get his stats from Franklinton, and we'll go over those. We'll obviously update our stuff, and you'll see that. But he had another great night. DeMikey's McLean has a long touchdown reception. They can do it. They can sling it. I don't think this loss is indicative of who they are. I don't think 3 losses is, Franklinton's not Franklinton. In fact, I'll say this. If you think so, go schedule them, right? You're going to see what you get, right? And they're going to be in a fist fight, and they can sling it. I'll say this too. Jacob Crane goes into that game with a banged-up thumb, can't really squeeze it that well, and he completes 90% of his passes for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, right? But look, I don't know what Coach Indesta's long history is in that offense in the wing T, but it's rare that you see a quarterback in the wing T do what Brody Loudermilk's doing. 35 carries, 196 yards. Marshall, they line up in shotgun and run power with him, and you're just not stopping it. It doesn't matter. And Lakeshore's got some injuries. They lost a couple guys last week for the season. They're a little banged up. Sean Brown, who hadn't had a lot of carries all season, has stepped up in a big way. Look, I think both of these teams, again, could very well meet in the quarters or semis. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
So hopping off a Lake Pontchartrain for a second, I'll admit I was buried in District 2-5A for the past couple days. If you can, Mike, catch us up on river parishes, bayou parishes, and your old stomping grounds.
Yeah, look, some big ones last night. I thought the St. Charles Catholic win over Terrebonne. St. Charles Catholic continued to just be one of the best teams around. They lose in a last second, touchdown to St. James, who St. James has another good one last night. They lose a close one to Shaw. In the river parishes, think about this. Hanville's a one-loss team. They beat Thibodaux last night, an undefeated team. Destrehan has been dominant since the Ash game, right? They've kind of beat up on everybody, including Terrebonne. Terrebonne's a really good football team. So I think it's week 9 that Destrehan-Hanville matchup is going to be. That could be for the district championship.
And that's perfect. That's how they want it.
That's how I want it to be, right? I tell you that I wouldn't have it any other way. So there's a lot of really good stuff happening there. Moving east a little bit, into the metro area, Rummel gets a big win over Warren Easton to stay there in the Catholic League. John Curtis gets a win over Holy Cross. John Curtis is playing really good fundamental football. Carr, we talk about it, right? They beat Brother Martin in very formidable fashion. But one of the things I'll say I'm impressed with was St. Aug came off that game last week, and they beat up Jesuit pretty good, right? Now Jesuit made some plays, but St. Aug, I think, is still back in it. They remind me a little bit of the Franklinton thing, right? Like, hey, don't look at a loss to Carr as anything indicative of who you are or how the playoffs are going to go. So there's a lot. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, but I got to talk to Jules Sumner this week. We talked about that a little bit. We at North Shore Prep, we're going to be adding Jules Sumner, A-Meet, Independence, Kentwood. We'll be adding that whole area here in the next week or so as well. So some more enhanced coverage for us. And then, look, I know you're going to ask. I'm going to tell you it before you even ask it. Next week, North Lake Christian at Pope John Paul. People don't know how big that game is.
In Slidell.
Yeah, in Slidell, right? And it's on a Thursday night. A lot of games are on Friday, so it's a big one for the area. Coach Pygott and those guys are rolling over there. They got a big win last night over St. Thomas Aquinas in kind of dominant fashion. North Lake Kenner Discovery game, it's 52-0 at halftime. I think Casnave had over 200 yards rushing before the half and maybe 10 carries, 12 carries. But North Lake threw the ball better than we have all year. We kind of spread some things out and let Sam Grant throw it a little bit. Jordan Willis, Coach Willis's son, who I think is a Division I prospect as maybe defensive back. He had a big game last night with 3 touchdowns, kind of a coming out party for him on offense. So it was huge. That sets up, another one next week. We talked about Slidell at Covington. I think that's a big one. I think for both teams, right? Slidell, are you that really good team that can go on the road and win? Covington, you're 4-2 now. You've lost a couple games that I don't think you thought you would lose. And lastly, Rummel at St. Aug. I think that's a fantastic matchup. That's kind of, I'm not going to say you're playing for second place in the Catholic League, but it feels like it, right?
Yeah.
So massive week on the North Shore and the South Shore. It continues to get better. I am heartbroken that it's week 7 next week. It doesn't feel fair.
Well, why don't you go get 18 in at Beauchene and
I'll try today. That's for sure.
You can deal with the heartbreak.
That's right.
Mike McMillan, North Shore Prep Report. They do a good job each and every week. They get better and better. And like I said, if you're anywhere near that area, you heard they're going to be expanding coverage. Follow them there. They know more about your team than you do. Mike, thanks so much for your time. NorthShorePrepReport.com. Follow them on your social channel as well. Mike, we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Marshall. You guys have a blessed weekend. Appreciate you.
Thanks to Mike. And let's hop right over to our buddy Chasten Tavares. He's going to cover the Lake Charles area for us. I believe they had the Hamilton Christian game there on Thursday night. And Chasten, Warriors stay undefeated, no matter no matter the opponent, no matter the situation. They step on the field and they dominate seemingly from the first to the fourth. At least that's what the scoreboard shows.
Yeah, look, it was going to be one of the it's the last matchup of unbeatens here in Southwest Louisiana. And look, Grand Lake, they're a little bit banged up. Charles McFarland, starting running back, has not played the last 2 weeks, will not play the next couple of weeks. They're just trying to get him healthy for the playoffs for week 11. But look, Hamilton just does Hamilton. It was the Javon Fidel show once again. I think he accounted for 6 touchdowns, and that's now 3 games in a row with 5 or more touchdowns for Javon Vital. The kid is special. The crazy part of it is I think we ended up having 35 penalties in that football game, and 90% of those were on Hamilton Christian. They're up 28-0 at half, and they had 18 penalties in the first half. Not going to see that very often, but look, it's I don't know if anybody else is touching them in that district. They just got to continue to stay healthy. I know Vito went out of the game at the end of last week, but he came back in because you can't keep the kid off the football field. But look, they do have another test this week versus Elton, but I really think that's their last kind of hurdle to get over. Could see that team go undefeated, as we've talked about a couple of times this year. Um, for Grand Lake, I think they're in a really good spot. I mean, they still can do some things. They've got to figure it out offensively. They found a little something towards the end of the game where they scored a couple of late touchdowns, but I think they're going to be fine. I mean, again, Elton, that they have a big matchup with Elton and Bazile Lumen, but I think they're going to be just fine.
Looking at some other games of not undefeated teams, but one team that's undefeated, Iowa and Leesville. I know that kind of your questions coming into the week was, who is Leesville? Is Trell Broom, that guy under center for the Wampus Cats? And then, but also, I know you felt that Iowa was going to continue their undefeated streak here so far.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think I knew. I think we all knew what that Leesville team is. We've kind of seen it. I mean, look, defensively, they're not very good right now, but offensively, they're a lot of fun to watch. Iowa, look, that's a tough matchup for Leesville, but Iowa just did what Iowa does. I believe that was a 7-point football game at halftime, 14-7, if I'm not mistaken,
Oh,
or
wow.
20. Maybe it was 21-7, and Iowa kind of pulled away late in that football game. But look, Iowa just continues to do Iowa. It seems like they're starting to find some things with Caston Lewis. I know they were a little worried after last week. They kind of St. Louis was able to pick on a couple of things that they didn't really like, and I think Coach Tommy Johns will tell you need some of those games. I think the big key for Iowa, to be completely honest with you, look, I mean, they've obviously still have matchups with Eunice and DeRitter looming. Iowa's has to, like, right now they're sitting at number 2 in the power ratings. They've got to stay there. Quite honestly, they have got to stay there. You do not want to fall to that 4 of all places to have to get that tough matchup once again with North DeSoto looming well down the road. So I think if you're Iowa, look, you got to find a way to hold on to that 2 or that 3 seed and avoid that 1 seed at all costs.
That's a really interesting way to look at it, and like you said earlier, they have a chance, and we'll see if they can do that, and B, if that's kind of how you still view them as we move through. Another unbeaten team, the Yellow Jackets, Kinder. They took on, I believe it was South Beauregard, but
Yep.
so I'm. It's your fault because you early on predicted these potential 3 undefeated runs that some of these teams can go on, and your survivor pool lives on. So I'm interested to see, if these if these teams can continue to make that run. And I mean, like we mentioned with Mike, it's not like being undefeated is the end all be all in the regular season, but for Kinder now, 60 points again, and they're on a roll.
Yeah, look, for Kinder again. I talked about it all year long. It's Isaiah Thomas, it's Brandon Perkins. They've got it offensively. I mean, they laid a 60 burger last night. Good Lord. For Kinder, they've got a couple of interesting matchups looming in district play. They're going to be at Menard here in a couple of weeks. A game that I'm kind of intrigued by. I think we may end up making that trip to go check out that Menard game. Haven't 100% decided on that because I haven't really gotten to see Kinder in person yet this year. But they've also got a Voyles looming down the road. So look, it's gonna be interesting. They've got some challenging games, some interesting matchups ahead. But look, that's a train that just continues to roll. And look, Coach Justin Reed in his 3rd year, he has got the boys rolling. I mean, that is a fun football team to watch. Look, I told you in the beginning of the year, as I told you, Hamilton Christian, Iowa, Kinder, those are the 3 teams. I didn't know if they lost a football game, and here we are. But as you said, that's not the end all be all. Strength factor plays a lot into that. I don't know if you're looking back at some of these teams have played, and you're like, yeah, that's a really good win. I don't know how much of those are on those schedules.
Yeah, and again, yeah, that is such a good point that you brought up. Is that I really at this point that number to the left of your name means so much. Another thing that you pretty much called right on the head was the Barb and Acadiana game. Going into the week, you said that Barb could score. Can they stop their opponent from scoring? 49-42 Rams over the Bucks. That's got to be a dang good football game. I didn't see it, but seemed to play out right like you thought that it might.
Yeah, actually, Barb had the lead, if I'm not mistaken, for a majority part of that game. They kind of let it slip there in the second half. From what I understand, I was at Jennings and Lake Charles College Prep last night, but um, look, again, it all just starts and stops on the defensive side of the football. I mean, they can't stop a nosebleed right now, and I hate to say that, but that's kind of just how it is. But look, offensively, that's one of the best offenses in the state. Jelani Gray is a lot of fun to watch. Sawyer Kuipers, like they've got the guys on the offensive side of the football. It's just the defensive side right now where they lack right now.
And tell us about the Blazers and Bulldogs last night. You were there.
Yeah, look, that's another matchup like that. That was one that we thought about doing. It was going into the week. It was Grand Lake and Hamilton, the battle of the unbeaten. You kind of have to do that one. Jennings and Prep and St. Louis Westlake was another matchup we had talked about. But the two yesterday were really good. Jennings and Prep. Jennings is up at halftime. They're back and forth. They get to play that game at McNeese. But for Prep, it just continued to be the Aiden Carter show. I tell you what, Jennings kind of had a little bit of a coming out party for DK Sams, who played really well. I think he had one catch coming into the football game. I think he ended up. I mean, I know he had to have 6, 7, 8 catches, and he was pretty much unstoppable for Jennings in the passing game. He played really well, a couple of nice catches, but Prep ends up pulling away there at the end. They get Jennings gets a touchdown to cut it to 2, or to cut it to 1. They go for 2, so on and so forth. Ensuing kickoff, they kick it deep to Aiden Carter, and look, Aiden Carter just does Aiden Carter. They had him bottled up all the way back at the 10-yard line, and he just houses it for 90 yards up the sideline for the touchdown to put him up 11 points. So it was certainly a wild one. St. Louis Westlake, a game I kind of got to follow. That was I knew kind of was going to be an interesting one going in. St. Louis had the lead there early. Westlake scores to make it 14-13. They scored again to make it 21-13. And St. Louis, look, they're driving at the 20-yard line, a chance to tie the game there at the end of the football game. And Westlake finds a way on defense to come up with a stop and get the win.
McNeese has a bye week. Red Sox are playing. What are you doing today, Chasten?
Well, I stayed up till midnight to watch the 15 innings last night on Major League Baseball.
Mariners.
Yeah, but look, I don't know. I think I'm going to do nothing today. I'm being
You'll be okay. And look, keep an eye on that Menard and Kinder game. I mean, Menard escaped with a win against Oakdale last night, but they look to be on a win streak when they match up there. So whether or not you're there, that should be a dang good one.
Yeah, that's certainly one we're keeping an eye on. I may have to make the trip to Alexandria.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Bulls too. They're getting some wins in that district. So yeah, come on up. We'll go get some brisket or something like that.
There it is.
Thank you, Chasten. We'll talk to you next week. Chasten DeVar Sports Pigskin Preview at the Walk-Ons in Lake Charles. That's on Wednesdays with Chasten and Patrick Fry. Interview coaches, preview the last week, get you ready for the next week. Thank you so much, Chasten. We will talk to you soon, sir.
Yep. Thanks, guys, for having me. Y'all have a good Saturday. We'll do it again in a week.
We shall. Same to you. All right. Yeah, a lot of good games down there in Lake Charles area last night. You start looking through them, and they've got some guys down there, some teams down there that are at the top of those polls. So hopefully they can stay there, and we'll keep an eye on that as well. It's time for Jace Lejeune from the Gridiron Football Group, Gridiron All-America Game. And Jace, have you gotten any sleep?
No, I haven't.
Good. Then you have answers. Look,
Yeah.
so one game. This is not exactly the game of the week in the area, but East Ascension and Prairie View. It's two teams that you and I haven't discussed too much, but teams with very talented rosters. I've been very interested just to watch Prairie View. I believe introduce football at a 5A level, and I'm not sure if David Feaster's still on that staff, but he's been a successful coach all around the state. So I'm curious kind of what your thoughts were. I believe that was a Thursday game. And I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are about those two programs and that game in general, if you were able to catch any of it.
Yeah, I saw the score. That was a huge win for Prairieville.
Prairie View, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Mike Schmidt's the head coach over there, and this is a tall task because if you kind of look at it, it's usually this is the second year of varsity action for Prairieville, but you go back and look at it. Usually, you have kind of like the 4-year or the 2-year JV period to kind of accumulate, and then you go and make that step up to varsity. That's not what Prairieville did. Is that, hey, we're going to, instead of taking swimming lessons, we're going to dive in the deep end and go right into the deep end of the pool. I mean, they went to varsity level 5A action last year, and of course you expected their growing pains, obviously going 5A and not having that acclimation period, but really the talent's there. The school's growing, and just a couple years down the line, it won't shock me that Prairieville is going to be a power at the 5A level. It won't shock me just because that area is growing. The school, you go look at campus, it's beautiful. More and more kids are starting to enroll there, and a lot of the kids went to our Gridiron camp in the off season, and they have some talent there. So it doesn't really shock. I knew that this was a year that they could go up and beat every now and then a team like East Ascension in their district. So that was a big win there. And right now through 2 years, this is definitely a program.
We saw Madison Prep get a win 32-14 over Southern Lab last night. What is your, let's like zoom in a click or two on the Chargers. Where do you see Madison Prep? How good are they?
They're really good. Actually, we talked to
Coach.
Tell me why. Yeah, they're really good. Talked to Landry Williams last night on our show, and make no ands, ifs, or buts about it, but they still want to run the football. They have a big offensive line, and that's pretty much the strength of the football team. They've always been pretty strong up front in the trenches, so that's not going away. Landon Johnson, their quarterback, had 3 touchdowns. You have Keon Robinson, who's a Grambling commit on the outside, wide receiver, a really good running back, Jayon Profit. And they're winning games. We talked about Madison Prep earlier, but they've won a lot of non-district games against teams that are at the 5A level. Their only loss was against Southside.
And so I have kind of a similar question to Madison Prep, and that's Parkview. They get a win last night, 2 wins on the season, but I believe you said earlier in the year that that team is probably a lot better than their record would indicate. And, they've been a competitor in Baton Rouge before. As they get into District 6 3A, they've got U-High, they got Glen Oaks, some matchups there later in the year. Can Parkview kind of get back to 500 and finish with a winning record?
Yeah, they have a winnable stretch. Obviously, the U-High game is going to be really tough. That's going to be the tough one. But you look, you got Collegiate, you got Mentorship Academy, you got Glen Oaks. That's a winnable stretch. So they have the opportunity to do that. and like you mentioned, go over 500. And yeah, it was a slow start to the season, but we talked about, I mean, look at the teams that they played at the start of the season. Dunham, which we talked about so many times on the show, Elijah Haven. But Prairieville, we just talked about them and a big win that they're improving over the course of the year. I know you just talked about the Chaston, about Iowa, and Iowa is undefeated, really good football team. So yeah, I mean, it seems like they're mass and prep, so that those are tough teams to lose against, and it takes a little bit of time. I mean, this first year football coach at Parkview Baptist for Devin Ducote, so it's going to take a couple of games to really install what you want, your culture in the program. And once you get it going, you get it going. Look at West Monroe right now. They lost early in the season North DeSoto, which is looking like more and more of a really good loss the way North DeSoto was playing. And now with the wins over Catholic and Ash, like, you never know when you get you just need a couple of games, you need a couple of wins to get everybody to buy in. And all it takes is one, and everybody really starts to buy into what you're doing.
So, I usually like to try to ask you something specific because you seem to know the answer. But zooming out a little bit, through 6 weeks, there seems to be, even among the quality teams in Baton Rouge, there seems to be more teams with 2 or more losses than there are 1 loss or undefeated. There's a few exceptions.
Yeah.
But there's not necessarily, really in any division, in any class, there's not anyone that's just in the Baton Rouge area specifically that's just been 6-0 and just destroyed everybody. Been a lot of back and forth and a lot of just kind of neighborly rivalries there in the capital area. So just in general, what stands out to you about that area through 6 weeks? Which programs, which surprising outcomes, and who's positioned themselves well to finish with 8-9 wins, something like that, and really continue the momentum that they've established, or also who can turn it around?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I'm going to answer that last question. Who can really turn it around? I mean, I call their games every week, so I mean, I get a really good scoop on what they're doing. But Episcopal, you look at their record and you see 1-4, but you also kind of have to look at the opponents that they've been playing. I mean,
they're never going to schedule a 5-0 non-district.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So they go into district play. And they played some tough teams, Ascension Catholic, which is another team that can really set themselves up with a great run with Trevin Simon, the running back for the Bulldogs. But you played them, you played Cameron Casnave and Northlake Christian, you played them as well. You play St. Michael, who they just lost. You talk about parity; they just lost their first game against West Feliciana. So yeah, they played some tough teams to start the season. East Feliciana, they got themselves a big win. There's a lot of people are sleeping on East Feliciana, but they got a lot of really good wins this year. Episcopal, Kentwood. So yeah, they're a team to watch. But yeah, it was tough opponents that they played earlier in this year, and they've been good offensively to try and get that defense right. But I mean, with their offense and their ability to throw the football, we all know they can run the football, but they have that extra dimension to throw the football this year with Zach Hugh at the quarterback position, Jeremy Mitchell at the receiver position. They got a big game next week, Slaughter Charter, homecoming for them. And the Slaughter Charter game, that was their first loss against East Feliciana. So that was a team that could really set themselves up good in district, and they have a chance to bounce back. But Catholic had a bounce back win as well after losing two in a row. I think it was a breath of fresh air for Hudson Ford to get a win after 2 straight losses. But those losses played Western Rail, that's playing great football right now, and Madison Ridgeland was like the number 1 team in Mississippi. So yeah, I mean that's a great win last night. I mean on Thursday night over Liberty. Zachary, they won the football game against Scotlandville. I mean they're quietly undefeated. Nobody's really talking about Zachary. So
yeah, and that's on us. Yeah, Broncos are rolling.
They really are. So they were able to get the win last night. Central bounced back after the loss to LCA, and that game was kind of deceiving though, because Woodlawn's really good. Seeing Woodlawn this year, and Woodlawn actually was winning that game entering the fourth quarter. They were beating Central, but Central had a couple unanswered touchdowns late in that one to kind of pull away. So I think it was 38-21, but that score is pretty deceiving because Woodlawn was actually winning that game in the fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean, those are basically your typical cast of characters. I expect Southern Lab to bounce back. I mean, you kind of look at their record, you think, oh, they have a losing record right now, but or around 500. But you expect Southern Lab to bounce back. They play a tough non-district schedule, so you expect them to bounce back over the course of the season.
What about putting you on the spot here? What about South Plaquemine? Do you know if they're if they look familiar, if they look similar to the way they did last year, or?
Yeah, I mean, they be honest with you, they lost maybe two or three guys that were key like contributors that were seniors last year. But really, overall, South Plaquemines is they're going to be in the running once again for a state championship. I mean, the quarterback was an underclassman. A lot of their best guys last year were 8th grade, 9th grade players. So obviously you're going to bring all of them back, and they're still going to be really good. They got Hillary Thomas. I know that. Rod Parker's their quarterback. He was a quarterback on the state championship team last year, so they're going to be really good. And in 1A, it's pretty. I mean, in that Division IV non-select bracket, it's going to be fun to watch. Obviously, we talk about Haynesville a lot. And,
undefeated,
undefeated South Plaquemines, and right now, because I actually covered their game for Gridiron on Thursday. Watch out for North Iberville. North Iberville is 6-0 right now, and they got a big win over St. John on Thursday. And St. John's a much improved team. They've already won more games already at this point this year than all of last year. They 4 wins to 3 wins last year, and that could be a 7-win team at the end of the season. And looking at the schedule, North Iberville has a tough one coming up against Ascension Catholic. In a couple weeks. I don't think it's next week, but I think it's a week after that. But besides that, like North Iberville has a great chance of maybe going at least 9-1. That game's going to be the telling game, and the story there, for them to in their second year, so like Prairieville, but this time North Iberville went through the JV run before getting back to varsity, but. They could be 9-1 and perhaps 10-0, which is their second year of varsity action, which is an incredible story.
Jace Lejeune with the Gridiron Football Group, Gridiron Football All-America game. Check out that website. They got some new commitments for the game that came in this week. Trace Crane, a couple other guys. Mm-hmm. So just go to Gridiron Football anywhere on the web and just take off. Jason and Andy and those guys will pour football all over you, whether you want it or not. And if you're there, of course you want to. So, Jace, we thank you so much for your time. And again, Gridiron Football USA, check them out online. Coverage of football all around the state of Louisiana. Thank you, Jace.
Absolutely, Marshall. Always a pleasure. Enjoy your football weekend.
Yes, sir. See you soon.
Yep.
All right, Jace covering football really in Baton Rouge, but all over the state. And another one of our correspondents from Baton Rouge is Caroline McPherson. She is the publisher, founder of SEC.com. And Caroline, with a lot of SEC teams back in action this week, it probably makes your Saturday a little more interesting than it has in the past. But following kind of the future of the SEC has kind of taken you into the high school ranks this past week, kind of looking at what some of the impact players in Louisiana are doing that will potentially make them factors in the SEC for years to come. So looking at some of this week, I know you covered Ouachita and Ruston last night. Dylan Berryman going up against Ahmad Hudson. Dylan, a senior this year, Ahmad, a junior. But God, what a thrill to watch those two players. Didn't face off against each other personally, but really, really a good game between those two.
Yeah, it really was a good game. I watched it. I'm actually back home right now, and so on the way back, I was listening to it, and it was a close game for most of it. Mac, stop! I'm so sorry. But yeah, no, it was a good game to watch for sure. It was cool to see both of those standout athletes for both of their schools, and they were both kind of had a lot of pressure on them. But that made it even more impressive when they did really cool things.
Yeah, and again, we talked a little bit about Ahmad Hudson. Like, you cannot exaggerate enough how impressive he is on the football field. I mean, you just saw a couple plays there where he just dominates, and he had a big game last night.
Yeah, he did. I got a lot of highlight clips from him too that I'm gonna put together and have it with my article, so that'll be cool too.
Yeah,
But yeah, they came out with I think it was a 21 to 14. So it was only a 1-score game.
Yeah. And I mean, I got to watch plenty of it too. And Berryman, again, you and I spoke about it, gets a lot of double teams, isn't necessarily going to get 3 sacks in a game or get a bunch of tackles or interceptions or anything like that. But he plays really tough up front, commands a lot of attention on the offensive line. And I know even after committing to Texas, that the Longhorns are still really high on what he'll bring to the SEC here in a couple of really just a couple of months. Richard Anderson, the Carr Cougars, they got a win on Thursday night. We talked about that. I mean, that's on your website. Is that Carr's just loaded with SEC talent. They seem to be the top dog, not only on the field but also in the recruiting game.
They had a big win. It was 48-13, so that was huge.
Yeah, and again, another matchup with some SEC recruits. Carr's got a bunch of them, but Mike talked about it earlier. Eastern Royal had an absolute highlight catch against the double team, and statistically, he had a really good game again, and that'll be someone that's going to be a thrill to watch as he finishes his high school career and see where he might end up in college.
Yeah, for sure. It's really cool to see their stats, but then also just see clips of what they're actually doing on the field at the high school level versus college. Because when you watch college, you get so used to everything is perfect most of the time, and if it's not, then it's unusual sometimes, and it's just a bad game. And in high school, there's a lot more room for error. And so when you see these standout high school players that are week after week going to battle and putting out and giving it their all, it's really cool to keep up with and watch.
Yeah, and again, with you particular covering the SEC, lucky you get to cover the best of the best in the state of Louisiana, because whether or not they end up somewhere in the Southeastern Conference, they definitely are attracting a lot of attention, and deservedly so. Some other things that you worked on this week and published at the site, SEC.com, was taking a look at some of the players that are actually making it happen in the SEC right now. Blake Shapen, the quarterback for Mississippi State, he's an Evangel grad from Shreveport. Mississippi State's had some really good offenses through the past, really since Mike Leach and ever since then. And he seems to continue to be part of that offense in Mississippi State, but really representing Shreveport quarterbacks well, because there's been a lot of good ones throughout the years.
Yeah, Blake Shapen was one of those that really caught my eye, because I had no idea he was from Louisiana. And so after a little research, I saw he originally went to Baylor and played, and then entered the portal and came. So he was one I was like, I have to cover him, because he's one a lot of people know, and I didn't know he was from Louisiana. But he, even though they lost last week, he had a pretty good game stat wise, and he had a 70, I can't remember what I put in there, 75, it was either 74 or 75, I think, percent completion rate, and that's the best that he's had all season. So yeah, he was one I got to cover, and it was a learning experience for me, but it was pretty cool to dive into that.
And then, of course, we aren't the only people talking about Arch Manning, but he is part of a program right now that's just getting so much attention and so much scrutiny. It's almost, you really, like you just said with Blake, you forget, like, oh, he played at a 2A school, in Uptown. So he's right from our backyard. But the Texas offense, they're going to be under a microscope every week. Arch Manning's going to be under a microscope as long as he's playing football, no matter how long that is. But it is really fun just to follow him, because knowing anything about the Manning family and just how tough it is for him to live up to everything, because he's good enough, he's good enough to meet those expectations. But it's such an interesting guy to follow because of what everyone has expected of him since he was basically a freshman.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that this is his first season as a starter at the collegiate level. And
Right.
so, yeah, he has a spotlight on him because of his name. And I feel like he gets scrutinized a lot because of how he's playing, but people aren't realizing everything that he's also doing off the field that's really important, and they could highlight that as well. That's kind of what I try to do in my article. I'm a big fan of NIL, and he is probably going to, by the time he's a senior, be one of the leading in NIL if he's not already at Texas. I think of him in my head kind of like I think of Angel Reese or Flaw J. Johnson, just because he already has a name built up. He's not like some of the college athletes that have to build up their name when they get there. And some people will see that as unfair because he's not playing on the field, but he's not doing terrible. And I think that they can get it together. They get their offensive line together, and he has a chance to redeem himself today at 2:30 at home against Oklahoma. So we'll see how he does there too. But you really go check out the article for anyone that is kind of into the whole NIL side of things, because he might not be a star on the field right now, but he definitely is a star off of the field.
Yeah, and I agree. He was at the forefront of that, when NIL just started being really just commonplace for blue chip quarterbacks. And yeah, he's been at the front end of that. And like you said, yeah, he's a rookie. So Texas, they're set with him, and they should be fine. Big game, like you mentioned, the Red River rivalry between the Longhorns and the Sooners. LSU's back in action today. Commodores will be in the SEC as well. What else are you looking forward to on a Saturday in the Southeastern Conference?
Well, I'm just really excited to watch. This will probably catch you off guard too, but the Missouri and Alabama game. I feel like that's a really.
You're not going to catch me off guard when you nerd out. You nerd out every week, so we're fully expecting you to have this sort of obscure information for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's just. It's not like either two teams that I'm really huge fans of, but SEC Nation's there this week, and Missouri. I think it's their quarterback, possibly. That I don't really don't quote me on this.
Rusher, I know they've got a running back.
Whoever they were talking about yesterday, they were saying that he is a slept-on candidate for the Heisman, and so I kind of started trying to look into that because I didn't know his name. I didn't ever have heard of him, and I keep up with a lot of things. So I don't really know much about Missouri, so that kind of interests me, and I was like, I need to watch this game and check it out and kind of see a little bit about what all they're talking about here. So I'm excited for that. And of course, LSU has South Carolina at home today. And so that'll be a fun game too, to see how Garrett Nussmeier comes out, because there's been a lot of reports he was injured. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, go give Mac a pat on the head and enjoy your SEC Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us again. Check out SEC.com. That site's growing every week. Got some new things being published tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah. And also this week, I'm not going to promise tomorrow because I don't know when I'll get back in contact or get answers back. But I did get Ahmad Hudson agreed to do an interview with me after their win against Washita. So I'll have that up as well. And that'll be really huge for me, at least.
Awesome. Yeah. I want a full report of that next week. Appreciate you so much. See inside the SEC.com. Caroline McPherson is the founder and publisher there. Log on there, and she will keep you updated with the Southeastern Conference. And you never know what other tabs are going to show up on that website, because she's hustling and making it happen over at SEC.com. Caroline, thank you so much. We will see you soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Have a good day. Thanks to Caroline once again. And we want to thank everyone who helped us with today's show. Nick Magnano, the color commentator of the Ash Trojans. Of course, Mike McMillan, North Shore Prep Report. Chasten Tavares out of the Lake Charles area. Jace Lejeune with the Gridiron Football Group, and Caroline McPherson with SEC.com. I want to also thank Shannon Belt, the Lafayette advertiser down there in Acadiana, helping us get some scores and stats and info from games that she covered in the Lafayette area. Check out Shannon Belt on X, Facebook, and the Lafayette Advertiser as well. She does a really good job of covering sports in Acadiana, some of the big games, not just football, but really everything. So thanks to everyone who helped us put the show together today. Producer Doug Gann, he's traveling for Wildcat football with LCU today. But thanks to everyone who made it happen. Next Saturday, 8 a.m., we'll be back to recap another week in high school football. And if you missed yesterday's special Friday edition of the Red River Roundup, go ahead and check that out. We've got that posted. That's got some recaps of Thursday games and also an interview with John Sella, the head coach of the undefeated 6-0 Loyola Flyers in Shreveport. Again, thanks everybody for hanging out with us this morning. We'll talk to you next week. You have been watching the Red River Roundup right here on 446 Sports.